Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Of The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larsson.
Part 1. Irregular Equations. December 16 to 20. Equations are classified by the highest power, value of the exponent of their unknowns. If this is 1, the equation is of first degree. If this is 2, the equation is of second degree, and so on. Equations of higher degree than 1 yield multiple possible values for their unknown quantities. These values are known as roots. The first degree equation, the linear equation. 3x minus 9 equals 0, root x equals 3. Chapter 2. Friday, December 17th. Advocate Nils Erik Bjurman set down his coffee cup and watched the flow of people outside the window of Café Heden on Stureplan. He saw everyone passing in an unbroken stream, but observed none of them. He was thinking of Lisbeth Salander. He thought often about Salander. What he was thinking made him boil with rage. Salander had crushed him. He was never going to forget it. She had taken command and humiliated him. She had abused him in a way that had left indelible marks on his body. On an area the size of a book below his navel. She had handcuffed him to his bed, abused him, and tattooed him with "I am a sadistic pig, a pervert, and a rapist." Stockholm's district court had declared Salander legally incompetent. He had been assigned to be her guardian, which made her inescapably dependent on him. From the first time he met her he had fantasized about her. He could not explain it, but she seemed to invite that response. What he had done, he, a 55-year-old lawyer, was reprehensible, indefensible by any standard. He knew that, of course. But from the moment he'd laid eyes on Salander in December 2 years earlier, he had not been able to resist her. The laws, the most basic moral code, and his responsibility as her guardian, none of it mattered at all. She was a strange girl, fully grown but with an appearance that made her easily mistaken for a child. He had control over her life. She was his to command. She had a record that robbed her of credibility if she ever had a mind to protest. Nor was it a rape of some innocent. Her file confirmed that she had had many sexual encounters, could even be regarded as promiscuous. One social worker's report had raised the possibility that Salander had solicited sexual services for payment when she was 17. A police patrol had observed a drunken older man sitting with a young girl on a park bench in Tanto, London. The police had confronted the pair. The girl had refused to answer their questions, and the man was too intoxicated to give them any sensible information. In Bjurman's eyes the conclusion was straightforward. Salander was a whore at the bottom of the social scale. It was risk-free. If she dared to protest to the guardianship agency, no one was going to believe her word against his. She was the ideal plaything, grown up, promiscuous, socially incompetent, and at his mercy. It was the first time he had exploited one of his clients. Previously it had never occurred to him to make advances to anyone with whom he had a professional relationship. To satisfy his sexual needs, he had always turned to prostitutes. He had been discreet and he paid well. The problem was that prostitutes were not serious, they were only pretending. It was a service he bought from a woman who moaned and rolled her eyes. She played her part, but it was as phony as street theater. He had tried to dominate his wife in the years that he was married, but she had merely gone along with it, and that too was a game. Salander had been the perfect solution. She was defenseless. She had no family, no friends. A true victim, ripe for plundering. The opportunity makes the thief. And then out of the blue she had destroyed him. She had struck back with a power and determination that he had not dreamed she possessed. She had humiliated him. She had tortured him. She had all but demolished him. During the almost 2 years since then, Bjurman's life had changed dramatically. After Salander's nighttime visit to his apartment he had felt paralyzed, virtually incapable of clear thought or decisive action. He had locked himself in, did not answer the telephone, and was unable even to keep up contact with his regular clients. After 2 weeks, he went on sick leave. His secretary was deputized to deal with his correspondence at the office, canceling all his meetings and trying to keep irritated clients at bay. Every day he was confronted by the tattoo on his body. Finally, he took down the mirror from the bathroom door. He returned to his office at the beginning of summer. He had handed over most of his clients to his colleagues. The only ones he kept for himself were companies for whom he dealt with legal business correspondence without being involved in meetings. His only active client now was Salander. Each month he wrote up a balance sheet and a report for the guardianship agency. He did very precisely what she had demanded. The reports had not a grain of truth in them and made plain that she no longer needed a guardian. Each report was an excruciating reminder of her existence, but he had no choice. Bjurman had spent the summer and the autumn in helpless, furious brooding. And then, in December, he pulled himself together and went on a vacation to France. While there, he consulted a specialist at a clinic for cosmetic surgery outside Marseille about how best to remove the tattoo. The specialist had examined his abdomen with ill-concealed astonishment. At last, he recommended a course of action. One way would be laser treatment, he said, but the tattoo was so extensive and the needle had penetrated so deeply that he was afraid the only realistic solution was a series of skin grafts. It would be expensive and would take time. In the past 2 years, Bjurman had seen Salander on only one occasion. On the night she attacked him and established control over his life, she had taken the spare set of keys to his office and apartment. She would be watching him, she had told him, and when he least expected it she would drop in. He had almost begun to believe it was an empty threat, but he had not dared to change the locks. Her warning had been unmistakable. If she ever found him in bed with a woman, Salander would make public the 90-minute video that documented how he had raped her. In January a year ago he had woken at 3 a.m., not sure why. He turned on his bedside light and almost howled in fright when he saw her standing at the foot of his bed. She was like a ghost suddenly there. Her face was pale and expressionless. In her hand she held her fucking taser. "Good morning, Mr. Advocate Bjurman," she said. "So sorry for waking you this time." Good God, has she been here before? While I slept? He could not tell whether she was bluffing. Bjurman cleared his throat and was about to speak. She cut him off with a gesture. "I woke you for one reason only. I'm going to be away for a long time quite soon. Keep writing your reports every month, but don't post copies to me. Send them to this Hotmail address." She took a folded paper from her jacket pocket and dropped it on the bed. "If the guardianship agency wants to get in touch with me, or anything else comes up that might require my being here, write me an email at this address. Is that understood?" He nodded. "I understand. Don't speak. I don't want to hear your voice." He clenched his teeth. He had not dared to try to reach her, since she had threatened to send the video to the authorities if he did. Instead, he had thought for months what he would say to her when eventually she contacted him. He really had nothing he could say in his defense. All he could do was appeal to her humanity. He would try to convince her, if she would only give him a chance to speak, that he had done it in a fit of insanity, that he was utterly sorry for it and wanted to make amends. He would grovel if that would convince her, if he could only somehow diffuse the threat that she posed. "I have something to say," he said in a pitiful voice. "I want to ask your forgiveness." She listened in silence to his plea. Then she put one foot on the bottom of the bed and stared at him in disgust. "Now you listen, Bjurman. You're a pervert. I have no reason to forgive you. But if you keep yourself clean, I'll let you off the hook the day my declaration of incompetence is rescinded." She waited until he lowered his gaze. "She's going to make me crawl. There's no change to what I said a year ago. You fail, and the video goes to the agency. You contact me in any way other than I tell you to, then I make the video public. I die in an accident, the video will be made public. You ever touch me again, I will kill you." He believed her. One more thing. The day I set you free, you can do as you like. But until that day you will not set foot again in that clinic in Marseille. If you begin treatment, I will tattoo you again, and this time I'll do it on your forehead." How the fucking hell did she find out about the clinic? The next moment she was gone. He heard a faint click as she turned the front door key. It was as if a ghost had paid him a visit. At that instant he began to loathe Lisbeth Salander with an intensity that blazed like red-hot steel in his brain and transformed his life into an obsession to crush her. He fantasized about killing her. He toyed with fantasies of having her crawl at his feet and beg him for mercy. But he would be merciless. He would put his hands around her throat and strangle her until she gasped for air. He wanted to tear her eyes from their sockets and her heart from her chest. He wanted to erase her from the earth. Paradoxically, it was at this same moment that he felt as though he had begun to function again, and he discovered in himself a surprising emotional balance. He was obsessed with the woman and she was on his mind every waking minute. But he had begun to think rationally again. If he was going to find a way of destroying her, he would have to get his head in order. His life settled on a new objective. He stopped fantasizing about her death and began planning for it. Blomkvist passed less than 6 feet behind Advocate Bjurman's back as he navigated with 2 scalding glasses of café latte to editor-in-chief Erika Berger's table at Café Hedon. Neither he nor Berger had ever heard of Nils Bjurman, so neither was aware of his being there. Berger frowned and moved an ashtray aside to make room for her glass. Blomkvist hung his jacket over the back of his chair, slid the ashtray over to his side of the table, and lit a cigarette. Berger detested cigarette smoke and gave him a furious look. He turned his head to blow the smoke away from her. "I thought you gave up." "Temporary backsliding. I'm going to stop having sex with guys who smell of smoke," she said, smiling sweetly. "No problem. There are plenty of girls who aren't so particular," Blomkvist said, smiling back. Berger rolled her eyes. "So what's the problem? I'm meeting Charlie at the theater in 20 minutes. Charlie was Charlotta Rosenberg, a childhood friend." "Our intern bothers me," Blomkvist said. "I don't mind her being the daughter of one of your girlfriends, but she's supposed to be in editorial for another 8 weeks and I don't think I can put up with her that long. I've noticed the hungry glances she's been casting your way. Naturally, I expect you to behave like a gentleman." "Erika, the girl's 17 and has a mental age of 10, and I may be erring on the generous side. She's just impressed. Probably a little hero worship. At 10:30 last night she rang the entry phone on my building and wanted to come up with a bottle of wine." "Oops," Berger said. "Oops is right. If I were 20 years younger I might not have even hesitated. I'm going to be 45 any day now. Don't remind me. We're the same age." The Wennerstrom affair had given Blomkvist a certain celebrity. Over the past year he had received invitations to the most improbable places, parties, and events. He was greeted with air kisses from all sorts of people he had hardly shaken hands with before. They were not primarily media people. He knew all of them already and was on either good or bad terms with them. But so-called cultural figures and B-list celebrities now wanted to appear as though they were his close friends. Now it was the thing to have Mikael Blomkvist as your guest at a launch party or a private dinner. "Sounds lovely, but unfortunately I'm already booked up," was becoming a routine response. One downside of his star status was an increasing rash of rumors. An acquaintance had mentioned with concern that he heard a rumor claiming that Blomkvist had been seen at a rehab clinic. In fact, Blomkvist's total drug intake since his teens consisted of half a dozen joints and one experiment with cocaine 15 years earlier with a female singer in a Dutch rock band. As to alcohol, he was only ever seriously intoxicated at private dinners or parties. In a bar he would seldom have more than one large, strong beer. He also liked to drink medium strong beer. His drinks cabinet at home had vodka and a few bottles of single malt scotch, all presents. It was absurd how rarely he indulged in them. Blomkvist was single. The fact that he had occasional affairs was known both inside and outside his circle of friends, and that had led to further rumors. His long-lasting affair with Erika Berger was frequently the subject of speculation. Lately it had been bandied about that he picked up any number of women, and was exploiting his new celebrity status to screw his way through the clientele of Stockholm's night spots. An obscure journalist had once even urged him to seek help for his sex addiction. Blomkvist had indeed had many brief relationships. He knew he was reasonably good-looking, but he had never considered himself exceptionally attractive. But he had often been told that he had something that made women interested in him. Berger had told him that he radiated self-confidence and security at the same time, that he had an ability to make women feel at ease. Going to bed with him was not threatening or complicated, but it might be erotically enjoyable. And that, according to Blomkvist, was as it should be. Blomkvist's best relationships had been with women he knew well and whom he liked a lot, so it was no accident that he had begun an affair with Berger 20 years earlier, when she was a young journalist. His present renown, however, had increased women's interest in him to a point that he found bizarre. Most astonishing were the young women who made impulsive advances in unexpected circumstances. But Blomkvist was not turned on by teenagers with miniskirts and perfect bodies. When he was younger, his women friends had often been older than he, in some cases considerably older and more experienced. Over time, the age difference had evened out. Salander had definitely been a step in the other direction. And this was the reason for his hastily called meeting with Berger. Millennium had taken on a media school graduate for work experience, as a favor to one of Berger's friends. This was nothing unusual. They had several interns each year. Blomkvist had said a polite hello to the girl and rapidly discovered that she had only the vaguest interest in journalism beyond that she wanted to be seen on TV, and that, Blomkvist suspected, at present it was quite a coup to work at Millennium. She did not miss an opportunity to be in close contact with him. He pretended not to notice her blatant advances, but that only induced her to redouble her efforts. Quite simply, it was becoming tiresome. Berger burst out laughing. "Good Lord, you're being sexually harassed at work. Ricky, this is a drag. There's no way I want to hurt or embarrass her. But she's no more subtle than a mare in heat. I'm worried what she might come up with next. She's got a crush on you and she's too young to know how to express herself." "You're wrong. She knows damned well how to express herself. There's something warped about how far she goes, and she's getting annoyed that I'm not taking the bait. I don't need a new wave of rumors making me out to be some lecherous rock star type on the hunt for a nice lay. Okay, but let me get to the nub of the problem. She rang your doorbell last night, is that the extent of it? With a bottle of wine. She said she'd been to a party at a friend's house close by and tried to make it look like pure chance that she found herself in my building. What did you tell her?" "I didn't let her in, obviously. I said that she'd come at an awkward time, that I had a friend there." "How did she take that?" "She was really upset, but she did leave." "What do you want me to do?" "Get her off my back. I'm thinking of having a serious talk with her on Monday. Either she lays off or I'll kick her out of the office." Berger thought for a moment. "Let me have a talk with her. She's looking for a friend, not a lover." "I don't know what she's looking for, but..." "Michael, I've been through what she's going through. I'll talk to her." Like everyone else who had watched TV or read an evening paper in the past year, Bjurman had heard of Mikael Blomkvist. But he did not recognize him in Café Hedon, and in any case he had no idea that there was a connection between Salander and Millennium. Besides, he was too wrapped up in his own thoughts to pay attention to his surroundings. Ever since the lifting of his mental paralysis, he had been continuously circling round and round the same conundrum. Salander had in her possession a video of his assault on her which she had recorded with a hidden camera. She had made him watch the video. There was no room for favorable interpretations. If it ever got to the guardianship agency, or, God forbid, if it ended up in the hands of the media, his career, his freedom, and his life would be over. He knew the penalties for aggravated rape, exploitation of a person in a subordinate position, abuse and aggravated abuse. He reckoned he would get at least 6 years in prison. A zealous prosecutor might use one section of the video as the basis for a charge of attempted murder. He had all but asphyxiated her during the rape when he had excitedly pressed a pillow over her face. He devoutly wished he had finished the job. They would not accept that she was the whole time playing a game. She had enticed him with her cute little girl eyes, had seduced him with a body that looked like a 12-year-old's. She had provoked him to rape her. They would never see that she had in fact put on a performance. She had planned. The first thing he would have to do was to gain possession of the video and make sure somehow that there were no copies. That was the crux of the problem. There was no doubt in his mind that a witch like Salander would have made enemies over the years. Here Bjurman had an advantage. Unlike anyone else who might try to get at her, he had access to all her medical records, welfare reports, and psychiatric assessments. He was one of the very few people in Sweden who knew her secrets. The personal file that the agency had copied to him when he agreed to serve as her guardian had been a mere 15 pages that mainly presented a picture of her adult life, a summary of the assessment made by the court-appointed psychiatrists, the district court's ruling to place her under guardianship, and her bank statements for the preceding year. He had read the file over and over. Then he had begun systematically to gather information on Salander's life. As a lawyer, he was well practiced in extracting information from the records of public authorities. As her guardian, he was able to penetrate the layers of confidentiality surrounding her medical records. He could get hold of every document he wanted that dealt with Salander. It had nevertheless taken months to put together her life, detail by detail, from her first elementary school reports to social workers' reports to police reports and transcripts from the district court. He had discussed her condition with Dr. Jesper H. Loderman, the psychiatrist who on her 18th birthday had recommended that she be institutionalized. Loderman gave him a rundown of the case. Everyone was helpful. A woman at the welfare agency had even praised him for showing such determination to understand every aspect of Salander's life. He found a real gold mine of information in the form of 2 notebooks in a box gathering dust in the archive of the guardianship agency. The notebooks had been compiled by Bjurman's predecessor, the lawyer Holger Palmgren, who had apparently come to know Salander as well as her better than anyone. Palmgren had conscientiously submitted a report each year to the agency, and Bjurman supposed Salander had probably not known that Palmgren also made meticulous notes for himself. Palmgren's notebooks had ended up with the guardianship agency, where it seemed no one had read their contents since he had suffered a stroke 2 years earlier. They were the originals. There was no indication that copies had ever been made. Perfect. Palmgren's picture of Salander was completely different from what could be deduced from the welfare agency's report. He had been able to follow her laborious progress from unruly teenager to young woman to employee at Milton Security, a job she had obtained through Palmgren's own contacts. Bjurman learned from these notes that Salander was by no means a slow-witted office junior who did the photocopying and made coffee. On the contrary, she had a real job, carrying out real investigations for Dragan Armansky, Milton's CEO. Palmgren and Armansky obviously knew each other well and exchanged information about their protégé from time to time. Salander seemed to have only 2 friends in her life. Palmgren was out of the picture now. Armansky remained, and could possibly be a threat. Bjurman decided to steer clear of Armansky. The notebooks had explained a lot. Bjurman understood how Salander had discovered so much about him, He could not for the life of him see how she had found out about his visit to the plastic surgery clinic in France, but much of the mystery surrounding her had vanished. She made her living burrowing into other people's lives. He at once took fresh precautions with his own investigations and decided that since Salander had access to his apartment, it was not a good idea to keep any papers there that dealt with her case. He gathered all the documentation and filled a cardboard box to take to his summer cabin near Stallerholmen, where he was spending more and more of his time in solitary brooding. The more he read about Salander, the more convinced he became that she was pathologically unwell. He shuddered to remember how she had handcuffed him to his bed. He had been totally under her control then, and he did not doubt that she would make good her threat to kill him if he provoked her. She lacked social inhibitions, one of her reports stated. Well, he could conclude a stage or two further. She was a sick, murderous, insane fucking person. A loose cannon. A whore. Palmgren's notebooks had provided Bjurman with the final key. On several occasions he had recorded very personal diary-type accounts of conversations that he had had with Salander. A crazy old man. In 2 of these conversations he had used the expression, when all the evil happened. Presumably Palmgren had borrowed the expression directly from Salander, but it was not clear what event it referred to. Bjurman wrote down the words all the evil. The years in foster homes? Some particular attack? The explanation ought to be there in the documentation to which he already had access. He opened the psychiatric assessment of Salander as an 18-year-old and read it through for the 5th or 6th time. There had to be a gap in his knowledge. He had excerpts from journal entries from elementary school, an affidavit to the effect that Salander's mother was incapable of taking care of her, and reports from various foster homes during her teens. Something had set off the madness when she was 12. There were other gaps in her biography. He discovered to his great surprise that Salander had a twin sister who had not been referred to in any of the material to which he had previously had access. My God, there are 2 of them. But he could not find any reference to what had happened to the sister. The father was unknown, and there was no explanation as to why her mother could not take care of her. Bjurman had supposed that she had become ill and that as a result the whole process had begun, including the spells in the children's psychiatric unit. But now he was sure that something had happened to Salander when she was 12 or 13. All the evil, a trauma of some kind. But there was no indication in Palmgren's notes as to what all the evil could have been. In the psychiatric assessment he finally found a reference to an attachment that was missing. The number of a police report dated March 12, 1991. It was handwritten in the margin of the copy from the Social Welfare Agency archive. When he put in a request for the report he was told that it was stamped, top secret by order of His Royal Highness, but that he could file an appeal with the relevant government department. Bjurman was stymied. The fact that a police report dealing with a 12-year-old girl was classified was not in itself surprising. There could be all manner of reasons for the protection of privacy. But he was Salander's guardian and had the right to study any document at all which concerned her. He could not understand why gaining access to such a report should require an appeal to a government department. He submitted his application. 2 months passed before he was informed that his request had been denied. What could there be in a police report almost 14 years old about so young a girl to classify it as top secret? What possible threat could it contain to Sweden's government? He returned to Palmgren's diary, trying to tease out what might be meant by all the evil. But he found no clue. It had to have been discussed between Palmgren and his ward but never written down. The references to all the evil came at the end of the second notebook. Perhaps Palmgren had never had time to write up his own conclusions about this apparently crucial series of events before he had his stroke. Palmgren had been Salander's trustee from her 13th birthday and her guardian from the day she turned 18. So he had been involved shortly after all the evil had taken place and Salander was put away in the children's psychiatric unit. Chances were that he knew about everything that had happened. Bjurman went back to the archive of the guardianship agency, this time to find the detailed brief of Palmgren's assignment, drawn up by the Social Welfare Agency. At first glance, the description was disappointing. 2 pages of background information. Salander's mother was now incapable of bringing up her daughter. The 2 children had to be separated. Camilla Salander was placed through the social welfare agency in a foster family. Lisbeth Salander was confined at St. Stephan's Children's Psychiatric Clinic. No alternative was discussed. Why? Only a cryptic formulation. In view of the events of the 12th of March 91, the Social Welfare Agency has determined that. Then again a reference to the classified police report. But here there was the name of the policeman who wrote the report. Bjurman registered the name with shock. He knew it well. Indeed, he knew it very well, and this discovery put matters in a wholly new light. It still took him 2 more months to get the report, this time via completely different methods. It consisted of 47 pages of A4, with a dozen or so pages of notes that were added over a 6-year period. And finally the photographs. And the name. My God, it can't be possible. Now he realized why the report had been stamped top secret. There was one other person who had reason to hate Salander with the same passion as he did. He had an ally, the most improbable ally he could have imagined. Bjurman was roused from his reverie by a shadow falling across the table at Café Hedon. He looked up and saw a blonde, giant was the only word for him. For a few seconds he recoiled before he regained his composure. The man looking down at him stood more than 6'6" and had an exceptionally powerful build. A bodybuilder without a doubt. Bjurman could not see a hint of fat. The man made a terrifying impression. His blonde hair was cropped close at the sides with a short shock left on top. He had an oval, oddly soft, almost childlike face. His ice blue eyes, however, were not remotely gentle. He was dressed in a mid-length black leather jacket, blue shirt, black tie, and black trousers. The last thing Bjurman noticed was his hands. If all of the rest of him was large, his hands were enormous. Advocate Bjurman? He spoke with some European accent, but his voice was so peculiarly high-pitched that Bjurman was tempted to smile. With difficulty he kept his expression neutral and nodded. We got your letter. Who are you? I wanted to meet. The man with the enormous hands was already sitting opposite Bjurman and cut him off. You'll have to meet me instead. Tell me what you want. Bjurman hesitated. He disliked intensely the idea of having to be at the mercy of a stranger. But it was a necessity. He reminded himself that he was not alone in having a grudge against Salander. It was a question of recruiting allies. In a low voice he explained his business.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.